My mother-in-law handed me a garbage bag, not a box, not a suitcase, a black plastic garbage bag, and said, "You have 30 minutes. After that, I'm calling the police." I was 31 years old. I had been married to her son for 4 years, and the reason she was doing this, the reason she stood in the doorway of what I had believed was my home, arms crossed, face stone, was that I had failed to give her a grandchild. That was how she said it too. Failed. Like I was a project that had gone over budget. Like I was a contractor who hadn't finished the job on time. I took the garbage bag. I didn't say anything. I think that was the part that surprised her most. I had spent 4 years trying to make that woman like me, baking her pies from scratch, showing up to every family dinner even when I had to leave work early to do it, laughing at jokes that weren't funny, pretending not to hear the things she said under her breath. 4 years of that, and when the moment came, I just took the bag. I walked to the bedroom my husband and I shared. I put in a few changes of clothes, my grandmother's earrings, my passport, and my laptop. I looked around the room once. Then I walked out. My husband, I'll call him by what his mother always called him, her prince, because that tells you everything you need to know about him, was standing in the living room when I passed through. He didn't stop me. He looked at the floor. That told me everything, too. I had $214 in my personal checking account. That was money I had kept separate, almost by instinct, because something in me had always known this house wasn't entirely safe. My salary from the dental office where I worked as an office manager had been going into our joint account for 4 years, and 2 weeks earlier, my husband had told me he needed to restructure our finances and had moved the bulk of it somewhere I didn't have access to. I hadn't understood at the time why he was doing it. I understood now. It was October in Cincinnati. The kind of October where the air smells like wet leaves and wood smoke and the sky goes dark by 5 o'clock. I stood on the sidewalk outside what had been my house with a garbage bag over my shoulder, and I thought, okay, this is what's happening. This is real. I called my friend from work. I'll call her my work friend because she was the only real friend I had made in that city, the only person who had nothing to do with my husband's family, and she answered on the second ring. "Can I stay with you?" I said, "just for a couple nights." She didn't even ask why. "I'll leave the key under the mat," she said. "I'm at my mom's until Sunday. There's soup in the fridge." I took a bus across town. The garbage bag sat in the overhead rack. I watched it the whole ride, that stupid black bag, because it was all I had, and I was terrified someone would take it. She had a studio apartment in Northside, 1 room, 1 window, a pull-out couch that left a bar across your back by morning. It was the most grateful I have ever been for a place to sleep in my life. I spent 2 days on that couch figuring out what had actually happened to me. The financial piece was the thing that kept me up at night. When we got married, I had signed a prenuptial agreement. At the time, I was 27 and in love, and his mother had presented it like it was just a formality, something all families like theirs did. And I had signed without a lawyer because I didn't want to seem suspicious or difficult. The prenup meant I left the marriage with what I came in with, which was essentially nothing, because I had spent 4 years not saving and not building anything in my own name because I thought I was building a life with someone. I had $214 in a garbage bag. On the 3rd day, I found a room in a shared house in Norwood, 4 people splitting a house, each renting a room, 1 bathroom. The room was $540 a month. I didn't have first and last month, so I told the landlord the truth. I was going through a separation, I had a steady job, I would have the second month's rent to him in 30 days. He looked at me for a long moment and said, "Okay, but 30 days. I moved in with my garbage bag. That first month was the kind of hard that doesn't make for a good story in the moment. It's only later, when you're sitting somewhere warm and safe, that you can turn it into something meaningful. At the time, it was just ramen, a lot of ramen, turning the heat off in my room at night, and sleeping in a sweatshirt. Checking my bank balance every morning with my eyes half closed. like I could soften the number if I didn't look at it directly. I also filed for divorce. The process took several months because Ohio requires a period of separation, and my husband's family had a lawyer who was very good at making things slow. But I had found a legal aid clinic that helped me for free, and the woman who handled my case, a third-year law student doing her clinic hours, young and serious and thorough, went through the prenup and found one thing. One clause that his family's lawyer had either not noticed or had assumed I would never find. I was entitled to reimbursement for documented contributions to marital property improvements. I had receipts. I had kept every receipt for 4 years, not because I knew I would need them, but because I was organized by nature. Those receipts, for the kitchen renovation I had partially funded, for the new HVAC system, for the fence in the backyard, added up to just under $22,000. It took 8 months and several strongly worded letters to collect it. But I collected it. I want to be honest about what I did with that money because I think the financial details matter. They're the part of these stories that people never actually explain, and then the math doesn't make sense and you don't believe any of it. I put $6,000 into an emergency fund and did not touch it. I used $3,500 to pay off the one credit card I had. I used the remaining $12,000 to enroll in an 18-month healthcare administration program at a local college, nights and weekends, while I kept working at the dental office, because I had learned on the floor of that room in Norwood that I was never again going to be in a position where someone else controlled my financial life. I also, around this time, saw my own doctor. I had been carrying something for 4 years that I had never dealt with fully, which was the question of why I hadn't gotten pregnant. My mother-in-law had made it very clear, very early, that she believed the problem was mine. My husband had seemed to believe it too, or at least he had never suggested they look elsewhere. We had done one round of testing at a clinic his mother had chosen, that his family had used for decades, and the doctor there had been careful, diplomatic, and ultimately vague. He had said something about factors on both sides and realistic expectations, and had recommended we continue trying. We had continued trying. Nothing had happened. My own doctor, a woman I chose myself at a practice that had nothing to do with my husband's family, ordered a full workup. When the results came back, she sat across from me and said, "There is no clinical reason you cannot conceive. Your numbers are all normal. Everything looks healthy." I sat with that for a minute. "So, what was the issue?" I said. She was careful. She said she couldn't speak to another patient's records. She said sometimes these things were complicated. She said that if I wanted, she could refer me to a reproductive specialist who could go into more detail. She didn't have to say it outright. I already understood. I cried in my car for 20 minutes. Not because I was sad exactly, more because I had spent 4 years believing on some level, even when I tried not to, that my body had failed, that I was the problem, that the word barren, which my mother-in-law had used exactly once to a friend on the phone when she thought I wasn't home, somehow applied to me. And it didn't. It never had. That was the day everything shifted. I finished the healthcare administration program. I got my certification. I left the dental office and took a position as an office manager at a larger medical practice. Orthopedics, 30 employees, a real operation, at $62,000 a year, which was more than I had ever made. I kept living carefully. I moved from the shared house in Norwood into a one-bedroom apartment in Hyde Park, which I loved with a fierceness that surprised me. Because it was small and the windows faced a brick wall, but it was entirely mine. I started running. This sounds like a small thing, but it wasn't. I had never been an athletic person. I started because I needed somewhere to put the anger, and running turned out to be where the anger went. I did a 5K, then a 10K. I signed up for the Flying Pig Half Marathon the following spring. At the half marathon, at mile 9, I fell in step beside a man who was struggling with the same hill I was struggling with. "I regret everything," he said, completely deadpan. I laughed out loud. It was the first real laugh I'd had in months. His name was. I'll call him my husband because that's what he is now, and that's the only title that matters. He was a structural engineer, 38 years old, divorced, with a 7-year-old daughter he co-parented with his ex-wife on a schedule they had worked out without lawyers because they were, as he put it, two adults who loved the same kid more than we disliked each other. He had moved to Cincinnati from Pittsburgh for a project that had turned into a permanent position. We finished the last 4 miles together, walking more than running, talking the way you talk to strangers when you're both exhausted and there's nothing left to perform. We exchanged numbers at the finish line. He texted that evening, "Good race. Want to get coffee sometime?" I stared at that text for a long time. Then I wrote back, "Yes, but I have to tell you something first." I told him everything. Not in the first coffee, that would have been too much, but over the course of several conversations, I told him about the marriage, the prenup, the garbage bag, the clinic, the thing I had learned about myself and about my ex-husband that I had never been able to say out loud to anyone except my own doctor. I told him because I had decided I was done managing other people's comfort at the expense of my own honesty. If that scared him off, I needed to know now. It didn't scare him off. "That family sounds like a nightmare," he said. Then, "I'm sorry that happened to you. You deserved better." That was it. No fixing, no advice, no reframing. Just, "You deserved better." I had not realized how much I needed someone to simply say that. We dated for 14 months. He proposed on the back porch of the house he was renting in Marymount on a Thursday evening in November, with no audience and no performance. Just the two of us and a ring that had belonged to his grandmother and a question he asked quietly, like he already knew the answer but wanted to hear me say it. I said yes. We got married the following April. Small ceremony, 30 people, a farmhouse venue outside the city. His daughter was the flower girl. She wore a yellow dress and took the job extremely seriously, scattering petals with a precision that made everyone laugh. 11 months after the wedding, I gave birth to a son. I want to stop here for a moment because this is the part that I think about the most when I go back over everything. 11 months. My son was born healthy, 8 pounds 2 ounces, with his father's nose and apparently my stubbornness. I was told this by the nurse within approximately 4 hours of his arrival. I held him in that hospital room and I thought about a word. I thought about it the way you think about something that someone said to hurt you, the way it sits in a corner of your mind and waits. Barren. That word that had been assigned to me by a woman who had never once tried to know me. That word that I had carried for years like something I deserved. I held my son, and that word turned to dust. He was 6 months old when my husband came home from work and mentioned, almost as a side note, that there was going to be a fundraising gala for the Children's Hospital Foundation. His firm had been contracted to consult on a new wing of the hospital and had purchased a table at the event. "You'd come as my +1, he said. "Black tie. Could be fun." I said sure. I didn't know when I agreed what I was agreeing to. My husband's firm's table was near the front of the room. The venue was a hotel ballroom downtown, the kind of space that has chandeliers and a dance floor and a string quartet playing near the entrance. I was wearing a dark green dress I had bought for the occasion. My son was home with a babysitter, and I felt good. I had not been to a formal event in years, and I had forgotten that I was someone who could feel at ease in rooms like this. We were shown to our table. I was looking at the menu when I heard a familiar laugh from across the room. I didn't look up immediately. I sorted through the sound in my mind, the way you do when something is recognizable but you can't place it, and then I placed it. And then I looked up, and there she was. My mother-in-law. She was at a table on the other side of the ballroom, laughing at something the person next to her had said in a blue gown, hair done, every inch the philanthropist. And next to her, a few seats down, was my ex-husband. He looked, if I'm being honest, Tired, not badly dressed. The suit was expensive, but something in his face had gone soft in a way that wasn't age exactly. He was alone. No one sitting next to him. A single place setting at his elbow. I put the menu down. My husband, my real husband, the one next to me, noticed the change in my expression immediately. "You okay?" he said quietly. "I know someone across the room," I said. "My ex-husband and his mother." He followed my gaze, just briefly. Then he looked back at me. "Do you want to leave?" And I thought about that. I actually considered it. "No," I said. "I'm fine. I want to eat dinner." So that is what we did. The evening went on. The string quartet played. The salads came. A representative from the hospital foundation gave a presentation with photographs of children who had been treated in the new wing. A little girl who had survived a heart defect. A boy who had learned to walk again after an accident. And I felt the tears come without being able to stop them. Because I was a mother now, and these things went straight through me in a way they never had before. During the dessert course, the event coordinator, a cheerful woman with a clipboard, moved through the room asking guests to introduce themselves at their tables for a brief networking portion of the evening. It was the kind of thing that usually makes everyone groan, but she was enthusiastic enough that people went along with it. At our table, I gave my name and my title, Director of Practice Operations, because I had been promoted again in January, this time to the director level, overseeing 4 clinic locations. Across the room, I couldn't hear what my ex-husband said when it was his turn. But I saw his mother's eyes travel the room as they had been doing all evening with the practice survey of a woman who categorizes everyone she sees. And then her gaze reached our table. She saw me. I watched it happen. The recognition and then the recalculation. Her eyes moved to the man beside me, noting the suit, the easy way he sat. They moved back to me. I could see her mind working. I did not smile. I did not nod. I held her gaze for exactly 2 seconds, then I turned back to my table and picked up my dessert fork. At the end of the evening, as people were collecting coats and saying their goodbyes, I heard footsteps behind me and turned to find my ex-husband standing there. He looked like he had rehearsed something and then forgotten it. "Hi," he said. "Hi," I said. A long pause. "You look," he started. "I have to get home," I said. "The babysitter has a curfew." His expression shifted. Something went through his eyes. I don't know what to call it. Not quite pain. More like the face a person makes when they've understood. Too late, the size of what they lost. "I heard you got remarried," he said. "I did." "And you have a—" "Yes," I said. "I do." My husband appeared at my elbow with my coat. He draped it over my shoulders without drama and nodded, briefly, at my ex-husband in the way that men sometimes acknowledge each other across a distance. Then he said, to me, "Ready?" "Ready," I said. We walked out of the ballroom. I did not look back. In the car, my husband drove and I looked out the window at the city and thought about the word again. And then I thought about something my mother used to say when I was a girl, which was that the best revenge was a life that needed no explaining. I had not fully understood that when I was young. I understood it now. Our son was asleep when we got home. The babysitter, a college junior from down the street, gave us a full report. 2 ounces of bottle, 1 bath, 3 rounds of goodnight moon, then down without a fuss. We paid her and walked her to the door. And then I went to the nursery and stood over the crib for a few minutes, listening to him breathe. He had his father's nose, my grandmother's ears, or so my mother said, though I couldn't see it yet. I thought about a woman in a blue gown on the other side of a ballroom, whose son had come alone to a formal event, whose eyes had done a recalculation when they landed on me, who had once handed me a garbage bag and told me I had 30 minutes. I thought about all of it for exactly as long as it took my son to shift in his sleep and make a sound that wasn't quite a word but was absolutely a declaration. Then I turned off the nursery light and went to find my husband. I was not what she had called me. I had never been what she called me. And the only people in the world who needed to know that, my husband, my son, myself, already did. I used to think that the hardest part of what happened to me was the night I stood on that sidewalk with a garbage bag over my shoulder. But I've had time to think about it now, and I don't believe that anymore. The hardest part was the years before that night, the years I spent shrinking myself to fit inside a life that was never actually built for me. Nobody hands you a garbage bag without warning signs. I just hadn't let myself read them. What I know now is that consequences are patient. They don't announce themselves. They just accumulate quietly, the way interest does, until one day the balance comes due. My mother-in-law spent years making decisions based on what she believed a woman was worth, what she could produce, what she could offer a family name, what she looked like on paper. She was very good at that kind of accounting. What she wasn't good at was understanding that people aren't balance sheets and that the things you do to someone when they're powerless don't disappear just because time passes. They wait. I think about the choices I made after I left. Not the dramatic ones, not the moment I walked into that ballroom, not the moment my ex-husband stood in front of me with nothing to say. The small choices. The decision to go to my own doctor instead of accepting a verdict from a clinic that wasn't chosen for my benefit. The decision to keep every receipt for 4 years, not because I was planning to leave, but because I was the kind of person who kept receipts. The decision to be honest with my husband, my real husband, before I had any reason to believe he could handle it. Those choices were made out of something I can only call self-respect, even when I didn't have much else. That's the thing I would tell someone who is standing where I once stood, on a cold sidewalk in October with a garbage bag and $214. The integrity you keep in the worst moments is the thing that builds everything that comes after, not the anger. The anger burns off, not the hope. Hope by itself is just weather. The integrity. The decision to keep being honest, to keep being thorough, to keep showing up for yourself even when showing up looks like eating ramen in a room you share with strangers and studying for a certification exam at midnight. That's what compounds over time. That's what shows up 5 years later in a dark green dress at a gala. And the intelligence piece. I mean this practically, not theoretically. I went back to school because I understood that knowledge was the one thing no one could put a prenup on. That certification, those 18 months of night classes, changed my earning ceiling permanently. Understanding my own medical situation instead of accepting someone else's interpretation of it changed how I saw myself. The smartest thing I ever did wasn't some brilliant strategic move. It was simply deciding to understand my own life instead of letting other people explain it to me. My son will grow up not knowing most of the story. He'll know his parents love each other. He'll know his grandmother on his father's side, who is warm and loud and brings too much food to everything. He will not know for a long time that there is another grandmother somewhere who once decided he would never exist. That's all right. He'll figure out who he is without that part of the story. And when he's old enough, if he asks me what I learned, I'll tell him the same thing I keep coming back to myself, that who you are when everything is taken away is the truest version of you there is, and that version is worth building on. I wasn't what she called me. I never was.